Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Keyflower, which is a 2012 released board game designed by Sebastian Bleasdale and Richard Breese. This one accommodates 2 to 6 players and takes 90 to 120 minutes to play. This one, the two key mechanisms are bidding and worker placement, but there is a fraction or an element of tile placement as well. So the table state is going to look like this when the game starts. You've got a number of these hexagonal tiles, depending on the player count. So an example here, we've got a 3-player game where you're going to have these 7 season tiles out there. You're going to have 2 turn order tiles, and you've got a number of boat tiles as well, which is important for future reference in terms of getting more resources into your supply. And we've got the additional seasons here waiting to be played in future rounds. You've got a number of these kind of profession tokens which are face down, and you've got these green workers here and your bunch of resources. Each player has also got their hometown tile here. It looks like this. These vary very slightly. And each player is also going to get given 8 workers at random in 3 different colours. So you've got yellow workers, you've got red workers, and you've got blue workers, at least initially. And that's going to be your kind of resource throughout the game and what you're going to use to activate these tiles and actually acquire these tiles. So as a general rule, each season works in the same way, with the exception of winter. Because winter, you are actually given the tiles at the beginning of the game, and these tiles are going to have end-game victory conditions on them. So for example here, for every set of each worker I have, I'm going to get 3 points. Or if I have 5 different resources, or any resources on this windmill at the end of the game, I'm going to get 5 points. Or the watermill, for every same resource I have on this tile, I'm going to get a point for. So these kind of give you a direction or a strategy to go for throughout the game. And when winter comes around, you can either choose to play these up for grabs as a normal season tile, or you can choose not to put them into play if you don't think you're going to do so well. And I will say that this was actually one of the concerns I had about this game, because I generally don't like it when games force you to make a decision that you're not really prepared to make, especially for new players. However, these are extremely simple and they're quite clear on what they want, and that kind of concern was instantly rectified and just disappeared, because this isn't a hard decision to make and you are flexible in whether you want to play these or not. So that initial concern was completely gone. So let's talk about how gameplay actually works. So as I said, each player is going to have their random assortment of these workers behind their screens here, so no other player is going to see what you have. And then in turn, you are either going to activate one of these tiles by placing a worker on them, like so. Like for example, if I did this, I can convert a yellow worker into a green worker. Or I can choose to bid on that tile by putting a number of workers on my side of that hexagon. So for example, if I really wanted the ability to have this keystone quarry here, I could bid, say, 2 yellow workers, which means that I'm bidding 2 at this time. And then I'll go on to the next player, and they can either choose to raise that bid by bidding more workers. However, they are restricted now to only playing with that colour that's already been allocated to it. So as soon as a resource is dedicated to one of these tiles, either by activating the tile or by bidding for it, then that's going to be locked in, and the other players are going to be subject to only using that type of worker. If another player decides to outbid you, then you have the ability to move these workers, as long as they stay together, to another tile where you can use to bid for them, or you could even choose to activate them. So when you activate a tile, you simply allocate a number of workers onto them and get the depicted resource here on this top box. So here I'd get 2 of these black resources. However, there are some further restrictions on these worker placement spots, where if you are restricted to only having 6 total workers on there. So say for example, if the first player bid 1 in order to get these 2 resources, then if somebody wanted to go there after, they'd have to bid 2, and then after that they'd have to bid 3. But after that, there is no chance of going any further, because you are limited to a strict value of 6 workers on any of these tiles. Now, on top of all this, is quite an important factor of bidding, because say for example, some people had used workers to use this activation spot here, and somebody actually ends up winning the tile at the end of the game or end of the round. Then not only are they going to discard these kind of back to the supply, but they're actually going to acquire all the workers bid on that tile. So you are potentially giving away workers, which is an important resource when you choose to activate powers that somebody else has bid on. So once everybody has decided to pass and no longer bid for any of these spots or use them as their worker placement spots, then all the ones that haven't been bid for are going to get discarded. However, all the ones that have been bid for are going to be allocated to your own little hometown here. So as you can see, I've won these 2 tiles. I've placed them onto my little tableau here, abiding by the restrictions. So roads have to go into roads, for example. Water will have to go into water. Now this means that from now on I can choose to activate these worker placement spots. And not only that, I can actually choose to keep hold of my workers when I do so. But you are not actually only restricted to using your own tiles. So for example, this player over here may have acquired these tiles like so. I can actually still choose to use those worker placement spots should I choose to. So if, for example, I wanted to play my yellow worker here, I could still get a black resource which would go straight on to my hometown tile like this. However, I've got to bear in mind that when I do that, then I'm actually giving this worker up to that player. So there's quite an interesting economy here where when you acquire more tiles and you really want something somebody else has got in their little tableau, then you are going to have to give workers away to that player, which of course gives them a lot more power to not only use new tiles, but to use their own tiles and to bid for future tiles as well. As you acquire more and more resources, you have the ability to upgrade your previously bought tiles by using this action here. So say for example, I place my blue worker here. This means that I can activate this ability, which means I can move one of my resources from tile to tile, and I get to have one upgrade represented by this kind of upwards arrow, which looks a bit like a house. And when you do that, you can either move resources. As I said, you can move this resource to here as a one movement action. And I also get one upgrade action. And sometimes that might say, you need to spend one of these additional kind of profession tokens like I have here. If I choose to do so, I can choose to upgrade that token by flipping it over like so, which means that I now have a more improved version of that action. Now I can acquire gold and get more victory points at the end of the game. So as you're building more and more of a tableau, you're going to want more movement points, so you can start shifting these resources around and upgrading as many tiles as you can. Players can also choose to go for these player turn tokens here, where as normal you would bid for that action, and the player with the most workers allocated to those spots at the end of the game or end of the round will get priority on taking the boats that they want in future rounds, which is going to ship them more workers in. Maybe they're short of a certain colour and they can't compete in the colour. Then, for example, they might want to take this tile here and get all these reds. And also some of them have these profession tokens, which of course are really useful for upgrades and sometimes for scoring abilities as well. And that's going to basically how that works. So again, if you're really specific on what you want and particular about what you want, then you can choose to sacrifice workers in order to get priority and give you a lot more autonomy on what you want into your supply. And that's basically how each round's going to work. Obviously, you're going to get a new bunch of tiles from round to round, which are going to ramp up in what they can do, in their power, and what they produce, and how you're going to get victory points. But that's the general fundamentals of the game. However, despite the simple rule set, there is quite a lot of depth here and a lot of decisions to be made. And for example, as the game develops, you're going to have the ability to get these green workers. And these green workers are really powerful because nobody actually starts with any of them. And of course, they are just a brand new resource where if you have the monopoly on them, then nobody is going to be able to compete with you. So, if you know for a fact that nobody else has a green worker, you can end up getting quite a powerful tile in your city for a very, very cheap price. So yeah, as you can see, you're going to end up trading resources in to get all these profession tiles to get a bunch of other resources. You can do the same here. You can convert workers into another. You can convert one worker into two other workers. You can convert tiles into other tiles. Some tiles in the summer even give you these boat abilities, which give you kind of game-breaking rules, such as in this example, if somebody chooses to lock in a tile here as blue, I can actually get around that and still compete in a different colour. So I could say I'll bid two reds, which normally you wouldn't be able to do. And as the game goes on, you start getting into autumn. You're going to start finding more and more ways to get victory points and converting goods into others, for example. So you want to be making sure that you're pushing resources around your tableau into the right areas to get you all those juicy end game points. So despite being a relatively straightforward game in terms of its rules, this game has a lot of depth and a lot of nuance. So for example, of course, you want to be building the best city. You want to be making sure that your roads are connecting, for example, and making sure you have enough ability to shift goods around, because if you don't, you're going to end up having to use other players' boards and ultimately giving away your workers. Now, that idea of the workers is definitely the hook for me in this game. It kind of has this real economic feel to it, where you have to be wary about what you have behind your screen. You have to be wary about what you're giving to your opponents, about even like an idea of memory where, I know I'm strong in yellow, so I can really compete on the tiles I want to get. Being wary that I'm going to have to throw away the ones back into the supply when I win these tiles, and if I choose to use them as workers without actually acquiring the tiles in the first place, then I'm risking losing them to other players as well. And of course, if I want to use other players' tiles, then I'm also giving them those workers, making them stronger in future rounds. Now, of course, you've got the ability to bid for player order as well in terms of getting the new workers you want in. You want to be making sure that you get particular upgrade tokens as well, so that you can actually upgrade your little buildings here and end up getting more and more victory points, like so, and getting more upgraded abilities. So yeah, there is a lot going on here, and player interaction is embedded in this game. You cannot get around the way, or get around avoiding the way you interact with other players, because it's fundamental to this game. You're outbidding each other, you're using each other's tiles, other people are using your tiles, and it all really is about min-maxing and getting that best cost benefit of each of your actions. The game is silky smooth. I mean, there's little to no confusion in terms of kind of portraying the rules or explaining the rules to other players, because it is so simple. Just use a worker placement spot, or end up just bidding for one, and of course building up your little town, which is so simple. But again, I always love games that have such a simple rule set, but just a plethora of options, loads of different routes you can go down, different endgame strategies. You've even got that mitigation of having the winter tiles knowledge, or having the knowledge of those winter tiles that were given to you at the start of the game. So you have the option to build towards something as well, which other players might not be wary of. But even in that facet, where at the end of the game, when it comes to winter, then people are going to have the option to play those tiles down or not. So that even if you do build towards a certain strategy, for example, if I wanted one of each worker type left over, it's going to get me X amount of points, then I can actually choose to play that, but I might not even win that tile, because it's going to be put up to auction just like all these other location spaces. And I will say, despite all these being relatively simple mechanisms in their own right, simple bidding, simple worker placement, and simple town building, I suppose, they come together so seamlessly, and kind of a game that's bigger than the sum of its parts, I would say. And that slight twist of locking in colours when you play one of your actions is just genius, because as I said earlier, you could know that you have a particular strong fleet of a certain type of worker, and you know that other people can't compete with you. So that's just a great idea of just locking people out of spots. And there's also an additional wrinkle where if you want to use a certain spot as workers, for example, if I really wanted to use this spot here, if I end up placing 3 workers down there at once instantly, then I'm actually blocking other people out of using that, because, as I said, you can only ever go to a spot with 6 workers, and each time somebody has to raise you. So if somebody else went there after me, they'd have to place 4 workers, which of course is an illegal move, because there'd be 7 total. So that's just an extra little wrinkle there, and all these little wrinkles just build up to quite a rich game, which I absolutely adore. I think the pacing of Keyflower is excellent. Each of these rounds do fly by pretty quickly, and before you know it, the initial ones in spring are just kind of acquiring resources, and then the second one are kind of converting those resources and giving you abilities, and then it's all about cashing all those things you've built into victory points. And it certainly doesn't outstay its welcome. It feels like it's ticking along rapidly from start to finish. And it always feels like you need to be on the ball and you can't waste your actions. The replayability of the game is pretty damn good, because depending on the player count, you're not going to see all the tiles from game to game. There's a whole bunch of tiles for each season, and you're only going to play a certain amount of those, and the rest are going to remain in the box. But not only that, you are obviously not going to be winning the tiles as well each time you want them. So you're competing constantly, and sometimes you won't be able to compete because of that imperfect information about which workers you have at your disposal. So you're going to have to be able to zig and zag and try different strategies and build towards different things, because you're not going to have your hands on the same tiles from round to round. So yeah, I really do like the replayability, and I think there's a lot of scope for getting this to the table several times. From a production and aesthetics point of view, I think the game's decent. I mean, I do like the artwork and stuff. I'm not so keen on some of the symbology on these cards. I think it looks a bit too simple, a bit basic, and a bit too prototype-ish. It would have been nice to see a bit more, a bit more bling on the symbology, and it feels just a little bit amateurish. But I am nitpicking. It certainly doesn't detract from the gameplay at all. Certainly, the gameplay outshined that massively. Also, these player screens aren't the best, although they look wonderful, like these houses. They're a little bit flimsy, kind of this plastic sheet kind of thing, or the sheet paper. It just doesn't, it's not going to really hold up very well, and mine's already starting to fray and stuff, and they're just not as good as I would have liked. A lot of screens are a lot better than these ones, and it would have been nice to see nice robust cardboard ones. But other than that, all the cardboard stock is quality. These are really durable. The tokens are fine. You've got the additional workers as well. And all the resources, again, they're all these cylinders. So I suppose some people might prefer kind of individual resources. But for me, I've got no issue at all with that. The game is not overly expensive, so I think it's all proportionate in terms of what you're paying for. And ultimately, I'm perfectly happy with the production and artwork. So overall, I am absolutely delighted with Keyflower. This is such a lovely game, and these are the kind of games that just do stay in my collection for the long haul. Games with simple, elegant rules, but with a well of deep strategy. The economy is just so satisfying. How are you going to spend your workers? How are you going to give them away to other players? If you're willing to do that, if you want to invest in your own little city and just keep your own little closed economy here, loads of different things to go for. The pressure of moving these resources around is great. Just the little element of city building is just satisfying enough. You've got the individual player powers you can invest in, that interaction of bidding for different tiles, the interaction of blocking people from certain spots. And it's just a wonderful package. As I said earlier, better than the sum of its parts. In fact, way, way better than the sum of its parts. It just comes together just magically. And it's not often that when I play a game, as soon as I play it, it just clicks with me. I think, yeah, this is good. This is the good stuff that we're all looking for. And I know Keyflower is regarded as one of the best kind of Euros of the modern era. Certainly still extremely well regarded. 9 years on from its initial release, and I will say this one definitely holds up well, way better than 95% of the other worker placement games out there. Because as I always kind of say on this channel, worker placement games have to be something special for me to enjoy them, because there are so many pedestrian ones out there, and this one is just magnificent. Two mechanisms I love. The economy I love, just the little wrinkles of strategy and little nuances I love, such as the green workers, the idea of giving workers to other people, buying tokens that other people have bid on to get those workers. It all just comes together wonderfully. So this one is a top tier game, and certainly one of the best games I've played this year. This one definitely gets my elite shield, so my highest commendation there, and I've got no reservations whatsoever giving it that, because this game is fantastic. So that concludes my thoughts on Keyflower. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.